Hello, hello. Hey, everybody.
Hey everyone. Hey Muskan.
Hey, Yak. We'll wait for another 2 minutes and then
No
we'll start.
worries. Let me get my slide deck up to show folks.
Yep.
This is very exciting. Hello everyone. For those of you who think that I look tired, it is because it's quite late here, so I apologize if I feel a little bit, I'm speaking a little bit out of it. It's 11 p.m. where I'm at. But we'll power through this.
Let's give another 1 minute out and then we'll kick off this.
No worries.
This is one of the most important sessions throughout the academy. So I really want everybody to tune in. This will kind of help you all to decide what data DAOs you want to build throughout the next 9 weeks. It's a very important session. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I'm very happy to wait. I think this is also a very important session for everyone. So I expect a lot of folks to have a lot of interesting questions to ask as well.
I'm personally very interested in this session, so I'm just I'm a listener today.
I was thinking that when I was preparing the deck, I was like, oh, I feel like this is stuff that you and I have talked about as well. So yeah. I've packaged it up, hopefully in a way for the folks here to understand. I could talk about this for hours, but I tried to condense it into a presentation that you guys can hopefully digest within the time that we have.
Yeah. Ayush, have we started the recording?
Yeah, it's already started.
Great.
Let's do it.
You can airbrush me. All right. Welcome, everyone. Hello. It's Art here. I am one of the co-founders of Vana. And first of all, the warmest welcome to all of you to Vana Academy. Congratulations on being part of this wonderful community. And obviously special thanks to Muskan and Ayush for putting together such a wonderful program. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. You are pioneering something that has been a vision of mine and Anna's for several years, if not the best part of half a decade. We see the value in the data capital that you guys will create as part of this program. We're creating new asset classes, and you are pioneers and leaders of this new economy that we're building. So I'm really excited to have you. I'm so excited to get to know some of you, hopefully on a more personal level over the next 9 weeks. And I'm excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is the value of data. So in this session, we're going to talk about what makes a data set valuable. I've developed a bit of a structured framework to think through how to evaluate the value of your ideas at this stage. And I've got some hacks to share with you at the end of this session. So make sure you tune in for the entire session to see those hacks for how to spot data opportunities in the market. So excited. Without further ado, let's just jump into it. One big disclaimer that I want to share at the start of this presentation is that what I'll be sharing with you are the opinions that I have based on my experience. I have worked in one of the largest data brokers in the world prior to coming to Vana. I've also worked on the sourcing side of things, doing human subjects research for one of the leading scientific institutions in the world. So this is my personal view on what value data has. The reason why I say that is because we're creating a new market here. The private data that we're going to be cultivating at Vana is traded behind closed doors today. So we're going to see market dynamics emerge as we start to create the public market for this data. And some of the stuff that I say today may not be relevant as we see some of this stuff emerge. So you are really at the bleeding edge of everything. Consider it kind of like when none of us are hopefully old enough to remember this, but when the first ever stock companies were created, people had no idea what stocks were. And now we trade them and we have derivatives on them and all these other instruments. So what's happening right now with data capitalization is very new. This is a very new market. And I'm here to just give you some offerings and some guidance as to how to think through the value of your data. And hopefully that will lead you in good stead as we navigate these uncharted waters today. So what I actually wanted to do was start off with a little bit of background. Some of you may not know about my story, so I wanted to kind of share with you how I became obsessed with human data. And it really has been an obsession. So in my younger days, I used to do a lot of policy and population studies. So studies about humans and the impact of certain interventions and programs on humans. So I was an advisor to the Prime Minister of a new country called Timor-Leste. It was the fourth newest country in the world. And my job, or part of it, was to track the national growth of the country using data. And then when I went to Harvard, I also researched for the Harvard Belfer Center, working on assessing the social impact for Fortune 500 companies. And that sounds pretty tangential to what we're doing today, but trust me, it's very relevant, because all of these types of studies relied on me trying to gather as much data from humans as possible to work out quantitatively how their lives have changed. And so this is a picture of a field collection that I did when I was in Colombia. I was doing an impact study for Nespresso. They wanted to work out how much impact every dollar they were spending in their supply chain had on the humans that it touched. So I had to go to a bunch of farmers in rural Colombia, and I had to go and ask them how had their lives changed since Nespresso started buying their coffee beans. Again, really random and weird. The data collection itself was quite a challenge. I don't know how many of you are familiar with agricultural communities, but they don't write a lot of stuff down. So going to them and saying, oh, you know, how has your life changed over the last 6 months? How has your spending habits changed? How has, you know, your travel and transport changed? They didn't really know. And so part of my obsession with big data actually came from a dinner that I was having when I was with my host family. And I was lamenting the fact that I didn't have any good data, and I was struggling to sketch out this model. And I saw my host mom, and she was constantly on her phone. And I said to her, you know, hey, Liz, what are you doing? And she said, you know, I'm on Facebook. And I said, you're always on Facebook? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, what could you possibly be doing on Facebook? You know, you're a rural farmer. What do you like about Facebook? She's like, oh, I post all the things that I buy for my kids. I buy a lot of things on Marketplace. I talk about the yield. I talk about the weather. And then boom, it hit me. I was like, oh my God, all of the data that I came here to collect, that I'm going around trying to get from farmers, is in this lady's Facebook. So I asked her, I said, can I please take a look at your Facebook? And she kindly showed me. And I went through and I had all of the data that I needed for my model. So rather than doing these, what you see on screen is, you know, a 20 to 30 minute field collection, I then just changed my methodology around and just started walking around asking people to see their Facebooks. I was like, I just want to see a Facebook. I scrolled through and I was like, yep, the yield 10 months ago was this because she posted about it to her friends. Amazing. And so this started an obsession with thinking through, well, how much data is there on each of us in the world, and where does that power reside? Fast forward several years, and I ended up working at Appen. So Appen is, and you wouldn't be blamed if you don't know what Appen is and you've never heard of them. There is a select few companies in the world that buy, sell, and trade all of our private data. I joined Appen as the head of impact sourcing, and my job was to try to find data that large companies were struggling to get. So Appen's clients included Google. We did Google Ads, Google Search, Facebook Feed. We did GPT, Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon. So all of the big tech companies would source their data through brokers like Appen. There are very few of them in the world, but they control a large amount of the data collection and private data business. It is a massive business, can I just say. I didn't realize it until I started working in the industry, that it's a multi-billion-dollar business. Some of these large tech companies spend more on data than they do on engineers. That's how large and how big of an opportunity it is. But in these transactions that occur behind closed doors, there was very little participation from the people who actually created the data. You and me and the people that we know, we were outside of the transaction. And this is when I got really obsessed with thinking through how can we participate in this market? And, you know, generative AI picked up, and Anna and I were like, look, this is a huge problem, not only for people who create the data, the rightful users, the users who are the rightful owners of their data, but also for people who want to build technology with it. The fact that there was this bottleneck in the industry made this data very, very inaccessible for anybody who wanted to innovate and create new AI. And what I mean by that is there is a reason why our Facebook newsfeed uses such advanced technology, and yet we haven't cured cancer with AI. It's because of the economic system that drives the data into different products. And that's part of the mission of what Vana is about, to try to create a space where this data could be publicly traded so that we can start to imagine new technologies that can be created with our own data. So that's all a bit of background story about me, just to kind of give you a bit of context as to how I came to Vana and why I'm, I guess, somewhat qualified to speak about this topic. I know you're all here and you probably have data sets in mind, so I wanted to share with you one rubric that I use to assess the value of data. And this is my rubric. There are 6 points to consider when thinking through the value of data. Now, it's tough to value data in a closed market. As I mentioned, based on the experience that I've had at Appen, like a lot of these transactions happen behind closed doors. So a lot of it is quite theoretical at this stage because the public data market doesn't exist. We're creating it. But these are the principles that we applied in relation to data sourcing and data value in the industry. And I wanted to share them with you because they're a useful technique for you to think through how to value the data that you're considering. So I'm going to discuss each of these in turn, and we'll do a recap. As you have questions that come up, feel free to post them and we can answer them at the end. But start to think about these as they relate to the potential data set that you're thinking through. So the first principle to think through for your data set value is scarcity. Just like any supply and demand market, scarce data is valuable data. If it's out there in the world, it's probably not going to be super valuable. And the best illustration of this is private versus public data. So public data is stuff that you can scrape on the internet. It has become a very commoditized industry. What I mean by that is the ability to produce public data efficiently is based on the power of compute, not on any sourcing power and nothing related to the data itself, because you just need an efficient compute engine and you can scrape all of that data. Private data or platform data, on the other hand, is stuff that can be very, very valuable because it exists behind closed doors. So at the very extreme, if you want to think about scarcity, you can think about the dichotomy between public data, publicly available, versus private data, platform data, and you should be able to fall somewhere in between. Some really important signals of scarcity are and these are kind of the yellow flags to look out for if you're thinking through a data set. If you're thinking through a data set from a platform and they've started to lock down their APIs, it's probably a sign that they see value in that data and they're creating scarcity in the market. They're trying to reduce the amount of data that they have that's public. We saw this with Reddit. We saw it with Twitter. If anybody has used the Twitter API since 2023, you'll know that it's like ridiculously expensive now, and then Spotify started to crack down on its developer API. Why? Because they're trying to create these scarce environments where they own all of the data. And when a platform is trying to restrict access, it's usually because they know the data is valuable. The trick is that data laws actually allow these collectives to bypass these scarcity walls. Individuals in most countries in the world have the right to reclaim the data from the platforms, and your jobs as leaders of these collectives is to help those individuals come together and structure their data so that they can almost crack through these walls and then come back together and create these fertile data gardens. So the question to ask yourself in the scarcity bucket is, how rare is your data? And consider that as it relates to your data set. The next thing you have to think about is depth. So when I think about data depth, I think about how much information one has in, we call it a row in the industry, but per entry. So like you have one, I guess, data point. How much information do you have within that data point? How many, do you have chats, clicks, preferences, location, device info, time series logs of the same person? And that refers to the depth of a single data point. The more depth there is, the more optionality there is for training, personalization, and analytics. Depth enables multivariate modeling and better signal discovery. So let me try to illustrate that with a practical example. If I only had one of your chat messages, say on like Facebook, and I aggregated one message from every single person on this call, I could certainly understand some stuff about you, right? But if I got one message, if I got all your messages actually, if I got your feed, if I got your device, if I got your location, if I got your age, I have many potential ways that I could model out the relationships between these variables. And so the deeper the data set that you get across several people, the more valuable it could potentially is. So in this category, I'd like you to think through your schema. So that is the structure of your data, and ask yourself, how rich is your schema? How many different elements do you have in there about a single row or a single data point? The more elements that you have, the more likely it is that the data is valuable. The opposite, or I guess the adjacent problem to look through here is breadth. So breadth is the volume, diversity, and generalizability of your data. So that's how many people you have, how diverse that sample is, and how generalizable it is to that specific use case. And I'll tap into that, double click on that piece in a moment. But when I was at Appen, it was a very common word that was thrown around was quotas. So what would happen is somebody like Facebook would be like, hey, I need 10,000 iMessage data points. And you'd be like, okay, sweet. And then as part of the contract, they'd say, but we want a certain percentage quota amongst this group, amongst this user, these types of users in this geography. Or, for a lot of visual data collection, it was, we need these categories of races or this type of skin color, and we need this number or percentage. For them, it was important because they were developing a product that was used by millions across a very diverse societal group. Narrow coverage is okay if your model is for a specific group. So example of that is like the Reddit data model that the Reddit data DAO created was specifically for Reddit shitposters. So it was okay that the sampling was a bit biased. But if you're looking at something that's supposed to be for society, if your data set is supposed to be broad enough to have a balanced view, it might be very important to make sure that the way that you're sourcing that data has breadth. So you're looking at diversity, you're looking at volume, you're looking at generalizability. It's the fundamental question here is, how representative is your sample? And I'd add to that, how representative is it in relation to the use case? So one of the tips, I have little tips laid in here. So this is like your little alpha. My little gift to you is, if breadth is an important part of your data set, consider dynamic pricing in your tokenomics so that somebody who is potentially a rarer person or somebody with a unique character trait might actually get more data, more token to encourage them to participate in your data set. Dynamic pricing here can be your friend. And I think we have different sessions to talk about tokenomics, but I'm just kind of layering in some tips here so that you can start to think through different elements of this. The next thing to think through is structure. Structure relates, for me, to your schema. for folks who aren't super familiar, when we look at data sets, the first thing that I always ask for is your schema. So basically, what's the structure of your data? What rows and columns do you have? What kind of operators are there in those rows and columns? So are they binary? Are they Boolean? Are they radial? Are they text? Are they numeric? Because that structure impacts my ability to be able to generate, to be able to use that data for a specific model. Usually, there is a stronger preference towards a really well-defined schema that's cleanly formatted and has limited noise. If you have a lot of randomness, if, for example, you're just getting a bunch of text data stored in a JSON file, it can be really hard to parse that out. It's unstructured data. Some people will be okay with using that, but some people don't want to go through the effort of thinking through how do I structure that data to be able to use it in AI. The most common issues that I've seen that have really devalued data sets are where there's misaligned data types. So, for example, where instead of using a numeric operator, you've classified a term as like a Boolean operator. You've got to make sure that the way that you've actually structured the data is consistent with the type of information that's coming in. And the other thing that really devalues the data structure is messy data. When you have a lot of null fields, it makes you question the validity of the data. So your proof of contribution here is very, very important to ensure that your data is very well structured. The question to ask around structure for yourself is, how clean is your data? I would actually say that I'm a little bit OCD, so a lot of my data sets tend to be very clean. Some people love data cleaning. I'm one of those people. Some people hate it. So this is something that you'll work through. I think there was a question here about, are you going to learn about this? You 100% are. This is part of the data refinement process, which I believe will be explained in technical workshops later on, which allows you to define that schema. So just keep this in mind, that the structure can be very, very important in terms of the value of the data set. The last piece to think, second last piece is timeliness. So some data sets age perfectly well. So there's a fantastic data DAO that exists on Vana right now, which is called Asterisk Data DAO. They are a women's non-reproductive health data DAO, and their mission is to try to advance medical intelligence for women, so advance medical treatment for women. Human bodies tend not to change as rapidly as, for example, sentiment on Twitter. So their data can age fairly okay. If you have a person's data point in that data set, it might be valid for several years, and some people might actually like to look at the time series data way back in relation to that data set. But there are other data sets where the timeliness of data matters a lot, and the value of the data decays really, really quickly. So you need to work out what type of timing is relevant to your data set given its potential use case, because timing goes to relevance, it goes to pattern visibility, and it goes to, if there is real-time inference that needs to be drawn from your data set, the power of that inference. There's an example of a data set that we're looking at right now where there's a partner that wants to measure real-time inflation. So inflation figures are published like monthly at best at some places. They want to do inflation figures, every hour. So for that, the updating of that data set needs to be very, very timely, hourly, in fact, for them to be able to gather any signal from it. So think through your data set as to how timely it needs to be in order to accrue value, because if you get this question wrong, you could have a really powerful data set like Twitter that's just really stale and therefore not very valuable. So you need to think through how relevant is your data over time. And my little tip here is your tokenomics. They really matter in this one. So if you've created tokenomics where somebody gets incentivized for doing one action and it requires subsequent actions for them, then you may not be getting a great data set here that is timely, depending on what your need is. So let me just concretize that for you all. If you wanted to get the Twitter data set from people and you give them a huge reward for connecting their Twitter and doing that little bit of a snapshot the first time, and no rewards for continuing to update their Twitter data, you might not have the best data set. So think about that in relation to your mechanics and your tokenomics, because that's what really matters here. The sixth and final, and thank you for bearing with me. There are a lot of them, but the sixth and final thing to think about when it comes to data value is strategic utility. So this is actually a catch-all. It is, I put it last, but it's actually the most important thing. You can have a rich and structured data set, but if you can't squint and tell me how that data set actually solves a real-world problem, it's not going to be commercial. It needs to somehow improve a model's performance. You need to be able to tell me a story of how it improves something, how it makes something more accurate, how it unlocks an insight, how it advances an AI model. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So there is currently not a data set out there that exists that is human movement, like a kinesthetic data set on human movement. And there's a lot of humanoid robots that people want to produce. So one can tell a story that if I collect human movement data, I might be able to improve humanoid robots. So you need to be able to tell a story kind of like that in relation to your data set. And if you can't, you should workshop it with us, workshop it with the team so that we can kind of guide that story for you. If that story, the clarity of the utility of your data set is very, very important, because if you can't tell a story, it's highly likely that that data set may not be important. So the question to ask yourself in number 6 is, what does your data set unlock? You've got to have a very clear idea about what your data set unlocks. So quickly, just to recap: scarcity. Is your data set hard to access or replicate? Depth. How rich is your data set? Breadth. How diverse or representative is your contributor pool? Structure. Is your data clean? Is it labeled? Is it schema aligned? Timeliness. Is it current, relevant, and refreshed? And strategic utility. What problem or product does it power? That is the rubric through which I analyze data value when people ask me to. It's the rubric through which the industry also sees different data value. So I encourage you to apply this to some of your thoughts and use this to assess your data. Now, a presentation from Art wouldn't be complete with some hacks. I have cheat codes for you all because I'm the kind of guy who likes to optimize my life. I hope that the cheat codes will help you to either inspire you if you're kind of stuck on a data set, or will help you to get to your answer faster. So here are my cheat codes for understanding the value of data. My cheat code number 1, draw inferences from the limited public market. So there is a small public market for private data. It exists in niche places. It's not openly traded, but you can start to draw some parallels between your data set and some of these public markets. So look in data marketplaces like AWS Exchange, Snowflake, and Hugging Face. See what's popular or what's selling, and you can use this potentially as a proxy for your data set. I wouldn't feel too bad if your data set isn't listed here, because again, these are very infant marketplaces. But if you see, for example, I don't know, the Twitter data set from 2023 going for $100,000, you could probably bet that a Twitter data set from 2025 will go for a certain amount of money, right? So you can draw some parallels and inferences based on what you're seeing selling on these platforms. One that I mentioned earlier, see where platforms are locking down on privacy terms or API restrictions. Every single platform that I would say like 50% of the platforms, that was an exaggeration, every single, but about 50% of the platforms that I deal with on a day-to-day basis have given me revised terms of use and privacy policies in the last year, probably because they're locking down their data. So it's a yellow flag. Take a look at some of these restrictions, because that's probably a valuable data set there. This is another little hack. Appen, Scale AI, LXT, Data Strike. There is a small group of these kind of data brokers that kind of sit adjacent to data labelers that gather human data. And you can actually sign up to these platforms as somebody who's going to provide data to them. I'm signed up to all of these platforms. Why? Because it's interesting market intelligence as to what they're paying people to provide them. That's the kind of data that they're getting paid millions of dollars to provide to large tech companies. So I would encourage you, if you're a little bit lost, to sign up for Appen, Scale AI, LXT, Data Strike, and any of these kind of provide your data companies, just to see what kind of data they're asking from you, because that could be inspiration for data that then you can also put into the market. And then keep your ear to the ground for licensing deals. A lot of these licensing deals, they definitely were not public at the time that I was working in one of the data shops. They're becoming more and more public now. So set up a Google alert for data sale, data license, and pick up early some of these data licensing deals, because oftentimes they'll announce the deals, but the cycle of data collection takes months, if not years. So you could potentially front run a deal if you're able to crowdsource some of this data and then be able to sell it directly to the person who's on the other side of that deal. So that's my cheat code number one. Draw inferences from the limited public market if you're not quite sure what data you're wanting to aggregate yet. Cheat code number two for you all is to, and this is going to be controversial, step away from Web3 builders for a moment and go talk to some AI builders. Go and talk to people who are actually building some of the cutting edge technology, because so this group, this is from a website. It's called Build Club. They're the largest group of AI builders in Asia Pacific. They have 10,000 builders and 11,000 AI projects that have been shipped to date. I got involved with these guys pretty early on, and I absolutely love them, because when I posted in the Slack in this group, I was like, "What do you do if you can't find your data set on Kaggle?" Kaggle is an open source data set repository. They all had so many suggestions and ideas. So AI builders are some of the nicest, friendliest, best people. I mean, just like you guys, people that I've encountered, and they have plenty of data needs. So join your local AI hackathons. Stay involved in the AI building space, because that will lead you in great stead as to what's happening in the space and where the data demands are, because these guys usually can't access some of the big data sets that the large tech companies can, and they're reliant on open source data right now. The last thing is cheat code number three: use your industry instinct. So I'm not an industry expert in medical data. I'm not an industry expert when it comes to manufacturing data. I'm not an industry expert in even human movement, human subjects data. I'm really not, because I'm the person who gathers and provides the data for the industry. But I think some of the folks on this call, you come from a specific industry. You kind of have an inclination about what sucks in your industry, or an industry that you're well aware of. I think knowing what AI does not do well in your industry yet is a really nice entry point into asking why, and probably figuring out that in 90% of the instances, it's because they don't have enough data. So think through an industry that you're familiar with, what AI is doing in that industry, and where it's capping off, because that's a really nice point of entry, and you probably are familiar with that data set. And I would encourage you for your first data set to be really familiar with it. So if it's coming from an industry that you're familiar with, that's even better. You'll be a great steward for collecting that data and bringing it to life. So a bonus cheat code for everyone here on the call is we'll share this slide link. Go to tiny.cc/Vana Data Bounty. This is a present to you all if you're stuck. We have a list of data sets that we have demand for. And if you're lacking inspiration and you want to use these data sets as the basis for your data, feel free to. This is our Vana Data Bounty Board. We regularly update it. There's a couple of data sets there now that people have picked up and are building. So if you're interested, take a look at this site. It's just a Notion dashboard, and email Sam at Vana Foundation or Muskin at Vana Foundation to discuss your interest in building any or all of these data DAOs. We give a little bit of context, but we can talk further about the requirements that some of the data clients have surfaced in relation to these data sets. Why I like them is because usually when there's one person that's interested in a data set, there are a lot of people that are interested in the data set. So that's really cool there. So that's my little gift to you. Go to the Vana Data Bounty Board and see what other data sets there are. That's an additional Vana gift. So just a quick recap for everyone. That was a lot of info, and then I'm going to jump right into the questions. Use the dataset value rubric, scarcity, depth, breadth, structure, timeliness, and strategic utility to do an assessment of the dataset once you have one in mind. If you don't have one in mind, think practically. Look at some of the data marketplaces, look at where APIs are being restricted, and then look for some licensing signals. Get that Google alert up to try to work out where these licensing deals are, because that'll give you some indication of where data value resides. And lastly, you can find some inspo on the data bounty board or talking to the ecosystem team. Muskan and Ayush are fantastic. I know that they're somewhat new to this space, but they're catching up really quickly. So definitely lean on the team for some support as to what data set to build. Lastly, I want to say, I don't know if you've gathered, but I'm an absolute data nerd. I could talk about this for hours. This is a lot of fun for me, and I want it to be a lot of fun for you. Data is super fun because you get to learn and work out things that you never knew existed in the world. When I did that field collection in Colombia and was able to actually work out the impact of coffee on these farmers, it wasn't just my job. It was just insightful to see how people change over time. And I want you to have fun with the data that you're collecting. Make it interesting for you. And lastly, but not least, welcome to the family. Thank you so much for applying. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm so excited to have you on our journey, and I really do mean it. I want to get to know some of you and some of your projects. I will open the floor for questions. My preference is that they're more general questions for the group. If you have specific questions about your data set, we can answer them in Discord or in one-on-one sessions, but I'll kind of try to offer insights that are more generalizable to the group in the question time. Muskan, should I just jump straight to the
Yes, that helps.
Okay, let me just quickly skim because I want to make sure that I'm getting some of the top ones. And then I can go back. Wow, you're going to take a lot of meeting notes. Hopefully, we'll share some of the meeting notes and the slides in Discord, and then this recording will also be available publicly, so you can access it. So let me just quickly go through. Okay. Are there evergreen areas, or based on what you say, is it better to look at rare categories? Good question. Evergreen areas. It kind of goes in waves. And this is from Asha. Asha, thank you for asking that question. So it goes in waves. When I first entered the data collection industry, language data was very important. Appen is actually a language data collection specialist, because at that time, people wanted language data to make their large language models better. The ones that we now use that we kind of take for granted today. I'm seeing different waves come through. So language is still important, but not the type of language data that was before. They were really focused in on conversational data before, because these large language models kind of used to sound like robots, and now they sound a little bit more human. So they wanted like people's messaging data and stuff like that. So now that's in there. What are they looking for in language? Now they're looking for niche language data sets. They're looking for audio conversation data. They're looking, actually, one of the areas which is kind of interesting that they're looking at is children's conversational and children's communication data, because a lot of that data is not public, and and if you try to put an LLM in front of a kid, they wouldn't be able to use it. So language was one wave. Another kind of, and I still think there's a lot of juice to be milked in the language space. In another one that's really emerging right now is robotics. So what's driving AI will usually also drive data. So a lot of the robotics research where we don't actually have the foundational data sets for that, that would include visual, human interaction from a first-person visual perspective. So imagine like you have a camera here, or you're using the AI glasses. That footage is very important for a robot, because that's how their sensors also operate, as well as the kinesthetic data that I was talking about. So having sensors on your body sensory data, and human movement data, also very, very important. So I would say there's no such thing as a kind of evergreen area, but you can see that these areas kind of start and then they grow depending on what's happening in the industry. So they move kind of in epochs. Is there a comprehensive list of data DAOs on top of Vana Collective, so mainnet or testnet, just to avoid overlapping efforts? Muskan, is that on the website? You can keep me honest on that.
Yeah, we have one website, but that's not updated. We should be actually updating that in like a couple of days. So yeah.
Okay, hold on for
But
a
there are a
couple.
few actually. Yeah.
Okay, Ivan, hold on for a couple of days. We'll add a couple more on there, so that you can see all of them, so that you don't double up effort. What I will say though is, if you did see a data DAO on there, I wouldn't be dissuaded from also trying to source that data set. The way that the market is working is that, or is designed to work, is that the data set that's of higher quality for that specific use case will win. So there might be a Twitter data set, but you might not agree with their methodology. You might think that you can source it better with a better proof of contribution and a better sourcing pattern. Go ahead, vampire attack it. Like, I think that that's exactly what we want folks to do. Build Club. Yep, that is the link. If you guys, Annie is the head of Build Club. She's a friend of mine. If you're having issues trying to get in, just ping me and I'll let her know that you're part of the club. It's a very, very cool organization. Please join it. Does the utility only have to impact AI training or a world problem or curiosity in general? That's actually a really good question, Asha. So the way that I think about that utility point is, you need to be able to just tell a story about how your data is going to change technology. And I would stress test that with an engineer or a product manager, just so somebody who knows AI, just so that it's plausible that those two things connect. So it could be that your data set is going to change the world directly. That's okay. Like the Asterisk data DAO, they don't quite yet know what model they're going to build with their data, but they know that if they aggregate a lot of women's health data, that they can present that information for the improvement of medical science. They don't know the exact thing that they're going to build, but that data is very important. There's a fantastic history behind that data DAO that I won't go into, but you should definitely look into them. Great team. So your data can have a direct impact on the world, yes, but you need to be able to connect those dots and somehow connect those dots with the data as the thing that's actually driving the change. So make sure it's not just a correlation, but an actual causation. Weezen, yep, you can definitely get the slides. Hopefully it'll be up posting soon. Do we learn schema and how to do this? You will, as part of this program, learn about data refinement, which will lead you to your schema. So actually, if you wanted to play with different schemas, just try downloading your data from any large platform like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You could even just Google like GDPR export and the name of the platform and download it. It will give you data in a specific format. Actually, let me see if I can show you my Google Takeout data. Let me see if that comes up. Yeah, okay, I'll just quickly share this with you. So if you use Google Takeout, for example, this is how you get your data off Google. It has all of these different schemas. It actually has so much data about you, but it also has plenty of these schemas. This is, speaking of depth, this is the deepest, one of the deepest data sets that you can get. Google has Fitbit, Gemini, Google account, everything, Google Chat. And you can actually export all of these in the one file. And each of these services has a specific schema or a specific structure. So if you wanted to just start even exploring or playing with data schemas, that's definitely one way to do it. Just download your data and see what structure there exists out there. Reddit is using Anthropic for accessing platform data without permission. It's huge. Yes, it's a big problem. The biggest problem that I saw actually in the data collection space was, even when people were compensated, they were compensated a very small amount that didn't actually represent the value that they were creating. So there are lots of AI companies that ethically pay for the data, but I think that the multi-billion dollars they're getting in revenue isn't actually flowing back to the data that they're gathering. So it's definitely a concern that we're hopefully going to address by creating an open market. And I think these are all AI meeting notes. So let's see if there's anything on the bottom. just want to address all of the questions while here. How does scarcity or strategy translate to utility or incentives for data contributors? Umar, that's a really, really good question. How insightful. So your tokenomics, one area that I'm really focused in on right now is pairing data tokenomics with the economics of data collection. The dynamics of data collection are a very subtle art. There's an art and there's a science to it. It involves a little bit of UX. It involves a little bit of incentivization to try to get the perfect data set. And so when you think about the scarcity or strategy piece, you need to think about how to effectively source that data as effectively as possible. And your greatest tool in Web3 is going to be the incentives, the tokenomics. Example, if you wanted if you didn't care about the diversity of your data sample, you might put in really strong referral rewards, because I'm more likely to refer people who are like me because they're in my immediate network. And that could be very good for your data set, because you could grow that quite quickly with people who are very alike. But if you wanted a really balanced data set, you might not actually want a super strong referral program where you award points for referrals, because you might want people who are quite far apart from each other to contribute to your data. So there's subtle art forms that you need to think through as you design your tokenomics, to make sure that they match the dynamics of that data collection. For data sets that can be quite difficult or quite personal for some folks, I would recommend something akin to something like a bonding curve, so that the initial contributors of your community become your spokespeople, and they're the ones who provide you the data first. So think through rewarding your early people more than your later people, and then think through how you diffuse the collection through your community, and how you leverage your community in order to kind of diffuse the collection. So the multi-dimensional problem. I don't, Muskan, do we have like a session to talk about data tokenomics with folks, or the tokenomics piece?
Yeah, we have two sessions actually. Yes.
Yeah, super important, guys. Like, I think that like this is the crux of it. We've been working on this problem for half a decade, and the incentives that you provide and the structure of those incentives really matters to get the right dynamics of the data in it. It should match the data that you're getting. If you can't use the same data tokenomics for Twitter as you would use for a cancer data DAO, for example, two very, very different data sets. So we'll need to work through that with you very carefully. Nate, thank you. Who are you seeing currently buying data from Vana Gardens? Mostly AI builders or data brokers active too? So we haven't sold any data to data brokers. They probably don't like me that much, but I'm actually still good friends with some folks who are working at some of these companies. Good friends with the COO of LXT and some folks there, and folks at DataStrike as well, and still folks at Appen. So I meet these folks every day. They haven't indicated a preference to buy data through the Vana platform. I think the product that we're producing is pretty new. We have gotten a lot of traction from research institutions and kind of, I would say, like early innovators who have AI products. So folks like Flower AI, that's one that I can announce. Two of our data DAOs, one of them has pre-sold their data to a hedge fund because they like to get insights. That one, you can see it's Diffusion, VFSN, and another one has sold their data to they have vehicle telemetry data, and they have sold that to I believe an insurance company for insights, as well as a battery manufacturer for insights. One of the subtleties here is because you're using Vana, you can sell or grant access to your data several times over. It's not a single export of your data to them. So that's why they're able to monetize it time and time again. That's why it turns into capital. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for those guys to continue to resell their data as well. Ralph, my parents own a janitorial service with over 100K employees. How best do you recommend I can collect and structure data on a day-to-day basis? That's very, very interesting. I probably need a little bit more information, but to kind of generalize this to the group, Vana is about self-sovereignty and user-owned data. That's one of the core ethoses that we have. And so while we can support institutional exports or imports of data, I think that it's really important ideologically that you ask yourself, who should have the right to grant access to this data? And how can I make it easy for them to to have the right to give you that access? So maybe in this example, what I would recommend is if you have 100K employees, you can have them opt into some sort of data sharing system where they could also provide, there's some sort of benefit for them as part of sharing the data. Maybe they get insights about themselves or something like that, in addition to the tokens that they'll get to govern the data set. But I would be reluctant to kind of to take their data and just say like this is part of the data DAO without like getting their actual self-sovereign consent on that. But I'd like to understand the use case a little bit more, Ralph. So definitely post in Discord or ask Muskan and the team. Gary, are there processes to request personal data from platforms? How high bureaucratic is it, and how soon will people give up asking? That's a very, very good question. So if you guys haven't tried a GDPR export from a platform yet, you should definitely try it. Some platforms are much easier than others. The general requirement is that platforms are required to give you your data within 30 days. Many platforms give you your data much sooner than that. And most recently, you should search Utah Digital Choice Act. Vana has a partnership with Project Liberty, the main drivers of the Utah Digital Choice Act. What that requires is that there is immediate programmatic access to user data for any platforms that are serving users in Utah. That is where the world is going. We're also working with the EU on GDPR reforms, and we're arguing for programmatic immediate access to your data. There is absolutely no reason why a tech platform cannot grant you immediate access to your data when you request it. They say it's for security reasons, but I don't know. Do you have like a bunch of little data fairies reviewing every single line of my data code? That's crazy. They should be giving you your data at the click of a button, and the laws are changing very quickly to give you access to that. There are platforms that will just give you access to data quickly, like WhatsApp, I believe, ChatGPT, you can export really quickly. There are some platforms that make it a really big pain in the butt to do it because they do the minimum compliance. I would suggest doing your data flow, testing it out, but also keeping an eye on the regulations because they are changing really quickly, and soon we will hopefully have programmatic access to all data and full data portability. Asha, again, thank you so much. How do we collect data other than our own solo female travel data? Do we ask others? Or we go on Facebook? This is cool. This is a sourcing question. Yeah. How do you source data? This is a lot of the problems that I was encountering at Appen, where how do I actually find this data? There are many channels through which you source. The most powerful way to source data is to create a community around your data set. Find the people that care about it. So if you want data from solo female travelers, think about an insight or a product or something that you can provide them as part of your data collection flow that could be useful to solo female travelers. Ideas could be, it could be an app that if you're looking at like their location. I have friends who have been solo female travelers, and one of the things that they're really mindful of is safety and security. So could this be an app or some sort of collection flow where you say, hey, if you share your data with us on a continuous basis, there is something that will will increase your protection by making sure that this data goes to the local authorities or something like that, so that they know that they're always protected. I'm just spitballing here. That may not be a great product, but giving your community something that they want as part of providing the data to the collective, so that they start to create a community around a purpose. That's going to be the best way to source that data, because then they become your advocates and they can start to evangelize your data set to other people. Team Credmont, we're building a credit card data DAO. Yeah, we're using that's a huge one. What are your thoughts on the feasibility and the value of this data? Are there specific dimensions of credit card data that you believe would be most impactful? So I will get specific on this one because this is something that is a very valuable data set and something which illustrates a very important piece. There are, like, the credit card companies can actually they actually buy and sell people's data already. There are alternative markets for that, which should be created because, why should they have the full monopoly over buying and selling people's data? So this is a great use case or an example of there is already a market for this data, but I don't think that market is efficient and that market is certainly not fair. So consider participating in that one. Credmont, great work. You've probably done your research and seen this. The other principle here is that the granularity of the data, so this is a depth problem, that you get from credit card purchases. So if you look at your credit card statement, it usually only says the merchant, and it has maybe, you could probably get down to the granularity of an item, right? So problem with that is that opportunity there. If you can get SKU level data, this is always something that's been asked of a lot of data collection folks. SKU level data is like, the SKU is like the size, the color, the specific item that you're actually purchasing. If you can get people to report or provide that information to you, that could be very valuable. And I've seen people try to do this with like receipt collection. So like they would try to cross-reference credit card data with actual receipts. They've tried to scrape receipts off online things. They've got people to forward receipts to different banks. That is one way to enrich that data set with additional depth. So think through that. If there is already a data set that is out there that's bought and sold and traded, or even if it's public, can you enrich it to create value on that depth axis? Because that could be very, very valuable. Credmont, if you want to chat about this, I'm very happy to talk to you offline about it. But this is something that I know a lot of folks in the industry are working on right now. You're quite ahead of the game on that. Asha's note taker is taking great notes.
Hey, Art.
Hey, Josh. How you doing?
Great. Good. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well, thanks. How's the health data going?
Yeah, it's going good. I was going to ask if you knew any in your former life which companies. I know of a few that work as that collect health data from the providers' EHRs and then take it and resell it to life sciences and et cetera. Do you know of any on your end? Do you know of any off the top of your head that?
I'll have to tap my networks for that for you, Josh. It's because it's such a health data is heavily regulated. You usually don't find the generalist data collection on data brokerage companies touching that data because it's too much administrative overhead. In fact, one of the screening criteria that we had was, is there any HIPAA data collected?
Yes. Because
then we wouldn't even do the job. There are specialist companies that deal specifically with this type of data.
Yes.
And I would say that for anyone who's doing health data in the United States specifically, make sure you workshop it with us a little bit. Because
I know I've been in the business for a long time. I know HIPAA I know all these different de-identification protocols and stuff.
Yes.
So I'm very versed in that. But
there are some. I would say that there are some exceptions to the de-identification protocols in GDPR for bona fide end users, as well as users providing their own consent for data sales, for example. That's how I think 23andMe managed to get through a lot of their HIPAA regulation. So I think it's definitely something to tap into and explore. I'll tap my networks to see if there's anybody specifically on the healthcare data. But that's a good point, Josh. Like, I speak from a very generalist perspective because I was at like this kind of generalist data shop. But there are specific niche brokers on specific types of data, and health is one of those sectors where there's definitely a niche broker.
There is one good news is that the Trump administration right now is in the process. They have an RFI out, and they're asking about things like info blocking.
Yes.
And Trump himself and the RFK are both proponents of freeing the patient access to their data. So there's a good tailwind there.
I'll tell you a quick anecdote before I jump to Muskan, because it's probably like you need to wrap up right now.
Yeah.
But one of my anecdotes is that there was I know somebody who actually invested in a company who's doing longevity data, and they were working out of a Harvard longevity lab, and it took them about 3 years just to get centenarian people's data to actually just work out how can we improve our lives. And I'm like, oh my God, like my great-grandmother was 104, and I was like, I could probably convince her estate to provide you that data straight away, because it's such an important problem, right? I didn't realize that health data was so regulated that it was actually stopping research from happening. And that's kind of like there is a direct impact if we're able to create those data sets to the world and humanity.
Agreed.
So that's like an example of that impact piece.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Muskan, you're probably telling me to shut up. I'm sorry. I'll shut up now.
No, what a great session. Thank you so much, Art. One last question, which I really want you to answer, is that the data we contribute to Vana, still those platform has the copy of it. How that can be solved with Vana? Like, I think that's an interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that my long-term future state on this is that we have a little bit more choice. The Vana protocol is a read-write protocol. So one thing you might not know is that like your data currently exists on Facebook because you probably use Facebook, and it's constantly being written to Facebook. But there is a future world in which tech companies have to comply with user-owned data, where instead of allowing them, you can allow them to write on their servers if you really trust them, but you should have the choice to be able to say, no, I want you to write to my personal data device, which is on my desktop, so that nobody else has access to this data. Vana is designed for that future world where we do a lot of policy work at Vana as well to try to change laws, like what we did in Utah, where they're actually going to force them to do that. They're going to force them to put data on an open protocol so that users can move their data around. In future, I hope that you will have the choice to not have to have Facebook store all of your data or your platform store all of your data, that you can choose where to put it yourself. Today, we're at the tip of the iceberg. So even just breaking the monopoly that these platforms have on these data sets is one step towards saying, hey, what you're doing is not okay. We're at least going to participate in this economically, and we're going to produce a rival product to what you're putting into the closed market. And hopefully other folks will be like, I like their product better because it's coming directly from users. It's richer data. There's something better about that data set. And in most instances, there is something better about the data set that you're providing. So I guess, Muskan, it's watch this space. We're built for the future where we don't have to have our data on these platforms. But for now, we should at least participate in the economy.
I think, thank you so much, Art, for joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I think probably our time. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys. Thank you
guys.
so much.
Happy weekend.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Muskan. Thank you.